pretty much everyone who's like a hardcore Trump or Harris supporter has already voted. Thank you to the early voting that is now the norm across the nation. Thank goodness. But a lot of people are still inexplicably undecided about how they'll vote. So the last minute pitches from both sides are going to mostly be targeting the elusive median voter. But one political action committee will be focusing its campaign efforts on a very niche voting demographic that is never acknowledged, despite having so much on the line. And that group is Coomers.
Oh.
Here's the Michigan Advance.
Go where the audience is. It's as basic a concept as there is in marketing, whether it's for consumer goods or political advertising. But for Wally Nowinski, a University of Michigan graduate and tech marketer, the audience he wanted to reach was in a very particular place, watching porn. The 39-year-old Nowinski, who grew up in Rochester Hills but now lives in California, and his friend, Matt Curry, who lives in Brooklyn, New York, teamed up to create their own super political action committee, FTW PAC. FTW PAC has been running a 10-second ad on pornography websites with a photo of Donald Trump, along with the statement, Trump's Project 2025 will ban porn. Enjoy while you can. It then transitions to a black screen that simply says, Google Trump porn ban. I'm targeting guys who don't find the last 12 years of anti-Trump messaging from Democrats particularly persuasive, Nowinski told the Michigan Advance. If anything, they like that he is problematic or brash or whatever you want to call it. But they don't know what vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance and Trump's allies on Project 2025 are cooking up. And they might not be on board with that.
And yeah, Project 2025 is pretty clear about this. You go to PDF, it's right there on page 5 of their 887-page mandate for leadership. And it says, pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. And yeah, that's a pretty startling thing to hear, especially when you are just seconds away from cranking your hog.
Got a nice day off, got the moisturizer set up, got the candle lit, the lights turned low, time to turn on some porn Rooney. Oh, what's this? You can't escape these political ads. Wait, hold on.
Wait, what?
Hold on.
Excuse me?
It's gonna be no nut all year?
No, I can't.
Not in Trump's America, what?
That's too much no nutting.
And by the way, it's you think of porn in a very retro sense of big production. This would come down on all OnlyFans creators and enjoyers and everything. All aspects of it.
Shut it down. And yeah, based on Google Trends data, these masturbators have in fact been wiping themselves off upon completion and immediately Googling Trump porn ban.
Only
like the ad has.
Only after about 45 seconds.
Well, I don't know how many more of these I'm gonna get.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta get them all in.
Anyway, here's some more about FTW PAC, which it doesn't stand for the win. It stands for Freedom to Watch.
Great.
And this is from a recent press release. This demographic has already heard all the traditional campaign messaging, and it hasn't worked, Nowinski said. We're meeting voters where they are, with a unique message at a moment when it is directly relevant to them. By leveraging underutilized digital advertising spaces on adult websites, FTW PAC has achieved remarkable reach at a fraction of traditional advertising costs. The campaign engages over 500,000 voters daily in crucial swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, demonstrating a highly efficient use of resources to maximize voter outreach. This innovative approach allows the PAC to deliver its message to its target demographic while maintaining cost effectiveness. And yeah, apparently buying ads on porn websites is way cheaper than buying ads on like fucking YouTube or something.
Yeah.
Even though these are some of the most heavily trafficked websites in the country, in the world.
Musk never allow his PAC to advertise in there because it's disgusting to him that people are wasting so much semen. He wants all that semen. Give it to him.
Saving that semen and
for me, I want it. Give me all.
No, it's probably low quality semen, unlike mine.
And
big
fun fact,
semen.
ladies, we know the women enjoy porn too, and they are also probably very upset about it.
They do. Yeah. There was a really effective ad that pissed off. Did you see this one? Pissed off a bunch of conservatives clutching their pearls, falling on their fainting couch, but it was like a guy and a chick having sex, and he's like, oh no, the condom broke. And the guy's like, and she's like, oh, I got plan B in the bathroom. He's like, oh, I'll go get it. And then this like old white dude is like, I don't think so.
Isn't there somebody you forgot to add?
It's basically that. And
he just spikes it out of the guy's hand.
Pretty effective message, because that's literally like what
they that wouldn't be available, yes.
But like conservatives are losing their mind. Like one guy downloaded the ad applied a pixelation filter to it, even though the woman is clothed the entire time. There is no nudity. She's just wearing a bra, and then re-uploaded it to like basically give the insinuation that there's nudity in this television and online ad, which of course there wouldn't be. Yeah, very silly.
Anyways, with October now over, it is kind of weird how the whole month went by without the usual October surprise. I mean, I guess you could call the whole calling Puerto Rico garbage thing, maybe that qualifies. But that's more of an unforced error, whereas October surprise is a label usually applied to some serious dirt about a candidate that comes out right before the election. And to be fair, the Republicans definitely tried, specifically with regards to Democrat vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, but it just wasn't particularly effective. First off, the Daily Mail broke the exclusive bombshell news that back in the 80s, when Tim Walz was in his 20s and would regularly go work as a teacher in China in the summer, he had a girlfriend.
What?
And this time, she actually does go to a different country.
She does?
Yeah. Well, actually, she is real, but she's in China.
Well, he was telling the truth.
Yeah, he had a girlfriend, which...
I can't believe this. This
is very shocking.
This is disqualifying.
And also very upsetting to all of the incels out there.
Uh-huh. No,
now I hate him even more.
He's supposed to be gay. He's Tampon Tim. Are you sure it wasn't a trans woman?
No, he just had a girlfriend, and this is very shocking stuff that certainly doesn't happen to anyone.
Bring back the fainting couch. Here you go. Tim Walz had a secret fling with the daughter of a high-ranking communist official during his 1989 teaching stint in China, DailyMail.com can exclusively reveal. Jenna Wang, 59, claims the VP hopeful showered her with gifts and seduced her at his pokey staff accommodation at No. 1 High School in Foshan, Guangdong Province. The lovers could not risk holding hands or showing affection in public because Wang's dad was a high-ranking figure in the Chinese Communist Party who would disown her for fraternizing with a Westerner. But their romance blossomed behind closed doors as they sipped tea, made love, and listened to George Michael hits, leading the then 24-year-old Wang to dream about marriage and a new life in the United States. No proposal was forthcoming from the future Minnesota governor, however, and the shame of being treated like a prostitute eventually left Wang feeling angry and suicidal, she claims.
Oh my God, Tim Walz had a tumultuous relationship with a foreign woman while abroad as a single man in his 20s. What a freak! How could he have done this? Now how can we trust him? Anyways, here's more. Tim was very passionate and very romantic. I can still remember dancing with him to our favorite song, Careless Whisper. She told DailyMail.com. The fact we couldn't touch or kiss in public just made it all the more exciting and intense when we were finally alone. This is
a romance novel.
It's reading like a romance novel. We were deeply in love, and I wanted to marry him and start a family. When it didn't happen, I felt very unhappy and sad. Tim's behavior was very selfish. It was several months after he arrived in Foshan that Walz is said to have fallen head over heels for Wang, a pretty highly educated English language teacher at the nearby No. 8 middle school. She was attending one of his lectures to brush up on her pronunciation when the then 25-year-old Walz flipped her headphones aside and whispered into her ear, "You were very beautiful." Tim was very handsome. I loved his eyes and his big mouth. His big American mouth. We talked afterwards and he was very complimentary about my English, Wang told Daily Mail.
This is a fucking like romance. Like, I'm gonna be honest, this is hot. Like, I'm not into like the fucking romance novel or like romantic movies and shit, but I'm like, this is a very like yeah.
Also, like, of course, any relationship, people are going to be sad at the end of it no matter what. But except the way that she's talking about it sounds like it was like a really fun romance for a while.
Yeah, it sounds like it was like the fact that they had to hide it from everyone. And
I mean, she said it made it more exciting.
In public, they had to act like colleagues, friends, but then behind closed doors.
I mean, he was just there on a work visa.
We're losing George.
Yeah. So, wow, what a fucking scumbag.
Yeah.
They're taking C. I'm on the objective.
Hey, they can't even use the like yellow fever thing on him because this is like a highly educated woman, whereas like the libertarian yellow fever guys like go for the most just desperate, uneducated, basically the kind of woman they can trap. Whereas this is a woman who comes from a powerful family who's probably smarter than him.
Also, because of this, we got a wonderful photo of Tim Walz in his 20s that just looks like a cool guy.
Yeah.
Charlie.
Anyways, they go on to explain how the relationship was mostly kept a secret due to, the social norms about cross-cultural dating and whatnot, and how that's what eventually led to the whole thing ending pretty acrimoniously, with Tim Walz being mostly at fault, according to her. And I'm sure she's mostly telling the truth on that. Like, dudes who are 25 are dumb.
Yeah, and also they're in a foreign country.
Yeah.
Like, great. That at least he wasn't like jumping around, sleeping around, or whatever. He seems to have actually genuinely liked you.
Yeah. But like, yeah, I mean, come on. In terms of hearing about the sexual history of elected officials against our will, which we've been hearing it our whole fucking life.
The idea that this would be a scandal at all when just the basic facts about Trump's previous relationships are wide out in the open is nuts.
Yeah, compared to every other political sex scandal, this is the most normal, relatable shit we have ever heard.
Yeah.
He wasn't married or in a relationship at the time. Sounds like he was a real gentleman for most of it. I mean, fumbling a baddie when you're 25, it's not just unremarkable, it should be a requirement for seeking public office in this country. Because if you haven't fumbled a baddie at 25, I don't know if I can fucking trust you.
Yeah.
And yeah, at a time when U.S.-China relations are especially strained, I mean, having a guy in the White House who has literally seduced the daughter of a CCP official seems like a great asset for the country, if you ask me.
Sure. Anyways, the funniest thing about that story and the reason it didn't get much traction is that Republicans, at least on Twitter, had no idea how to react to it. They mostly just made jokes about how shocked they were that Tampon Tim had a relationship with a woman. How is he be able to do it? Not Cam.
That's right,
No!
you
Yeah, it was mostly just like fake news. It's like, no, we're publishing this to help you. You should believe this.
Boom.
Not fair.
So there's just not a lot you can do with news about Tim Walz having a consensual relationship 35 years ago when your own guy has been accused by multiple women of sexual assault going back several decades and was caught on a hot mic talking about grabbing women by the pussy.
At like age 65.
Yeah. So that story's a dud. What else you got? Here's another. Tim Walz allegedly told a high school football player struggling with crime and alcohol to keep playing.
Oh my fucking God.
Ladies and gentlemen,
what a piece of work this Tim Walz.
we got him. He was inspiring. Told him to
No. He was
face those struggles.
he was turning a blind eye to criminal mischief.
Oh, you mean the same way that oh God, what was his name? The Speaker of the House that turned a blind eye to some issues with the wrestlers.
Hastert? Dennis Hastert?
No. What's his name?
Dennis Hastert was the former Speaker of the House who, definitely molested a bunch of boys. But then there's Jim Jordan who, something about the sport of high school wrestling. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty.
Jim Jordan, not Speaker, yeah.
Yeah, Jim Jordan, he tried to be Speaker. And if he had become Speaker, he would have been the second Republican Speaker of the House in about 20 years to be tied to a horrible sex scandal or a horrible sexual assault scandal involving high school-aged boys playing wrestling.
Yeah. Anyways, here's Fox News with more.
Former Mankato West linebacker Dan Clement told The Ringer that he began to experiment with alcohol when he was in high school. Then, the summer between his junior and senior year, Clement said he was arrested multiple times for underage drinking. Clement had a suspension from football to begin his final high school season and said he decided, I'm just not going to play at all. But Clement said Walz repeatedly approached him in the hallways that year and told the teenager, we need you. He knew I was struggling, Clement told the outlet, adding that Walz told him, I don't care about that other stuff. Clement said after Walz's intervention that he eventually returned to the team for the second half of the season. However, Clement said he did not get sober until a full decade after Walz pushed him to return to the field for his final season, The Ringer reported. Still, Clement thanked Walz for his impact on his life. The caring attention he gave, that positive support can pull you through really dark times in your life, Clement said, adding that he told Walz, I'm leaning on you. I'm trusting you here. I think partying is a better idea. You don't think so, and I'm going to trust you on that.
Wait, this is supposed to be a bad story? It sounds like he motivated a player to focus on the game he was good at playing instead of
FoxNews.com hit piece.
This is
and if you look at the fucking Twitter,
insane.
if you look at the Twitter replies to it, it's, of course, none of the people actually read any of the article. And so they're just like, oh, Tim Walz was like giving alcohol to his players.
Oh my God.
Helping them commit crimes.
And the people who did read it, I assume, have never had any kind of like positive male role model in their lives. They're
supposed to beat him with the belt.
Yeah, exactly. All of these fucking dudes are just mimicking their father's behavior.
You're supposed to knock their teeth out. They burn a cigarette on their arm.
The idea that they would have a positive, like some positive reinforcement or a positive male figure in their lives, that's how they view it.
Yeah.
It's nuts. It sounds like he did the right thing by trying to take this kid's mind off something. When you're in high school, you're experimenting anyway. You're like, look, we need you out there, okay, bud?
Yeah, I mean, this is like literally, I mean, this gets to the heart of like the key difference in how Republicans view crime and morals and how, you know, a lot of liberals feel the same way, but how people even further on the left see it, where it's like people do bad things, they break the law, they get into drugs and alcohol when they don't have a purpose, when they don't have like a guiding light in their life, giving them something more important to do. And
Also, people are better than their worst days. You know,
so when you go to prison in this country, you get out and you're essentially punished for the rest of your life by not being able to find something better to do.
and in a
that
lot
would
of
give you
cases,
purpose.
not all, but in a lot of cases, you're just having more of that negative reinforcement in prison.
Yeah.
There are programs that are wonderful and people do rehabilitate, but yeah, it's a vicious circle.
He should have beat this kid.
That's what a Republican would have been like. Well, I just beat it out of him, and they never drank again.
Yeah.
Hardpoint locked down.
So Tim Walz knew that one of his players was getting drunk, having a little alcohol, doing some drugs, being a criminal. Instead of kicking him off the team and helping police send him to jail, he encouraged him to keep playing football.
Jesus.
I don't care about that stuff. We need you on the team.
He's looks the other way.
How many other criminals has Tim Walz turned a blind eye to, though? Or, I guess in this scenario, tried to help get back on their feet.
He's friends with criminals.
How can we trust this man whose football players seem to universally consider him a really good dude? Even
Very
the one in this
suspicious.
story.
Very suspicious.
Anyway, speaking of Tim Walz, it finally happened this week. He went on Twitch and he played Crazy Taxi. The Sega Dreamcast game that he was first rumored to and then later confirmed to have been addicted to in the early 2000s. And while his skills seemed a bit rusty after so many years, he was definitely no noob.
Yeah, he knew his way around.
Which raises the question, what else is Tim Walz addicted to?
Yeah.
Pie recipes. Fixing people's cars.
Helping teenagers drink.
Yard work.
Seducing Chinese women.
Yeah. Do the American people really want a gamer in the White House? Just one heartbeat away from the presidency?
Yeah, sorry, Tim Walz. Politics is not a game. This is life or death. You can't just take a shortcut on the Crazy Taxi map to get to your destination. We use things like process and diplomacy here. Yeah, so I'm sorry, you're fired.
You can't just run over a clock and get extra time. There's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah. Anyway, it's so like, I mean, the standard is so low, but it is nice. The one bright light in this election for me is just like, oh, Tim Walz seems like a pretty decent guy.
Yeah.
Very rare in politicians. He seems like a normal dude.
If the
with
Harris
a good
campaign
head on his shoulders.
if the Harris campaign loses fair and square, I think that Minnesota will be happy to have him back.
Yeah.
Having said that, there was an October surprise, but it's like this like guy is drip feeding and he's writing a book about
Michael
it.
Wolf with the
Epstein stuff.
Yeah, if he released one, like, I have 100 hours of it. He released one clip where it was like, I don't know.
Is Epstein talking about, he's being critical about the people Trump surrounded himself
He
with?
says that this is evidence that Epstein was like in close contact with Trump early on in his presidency and had like inside info on the dynamics. But like you listen to it and you're like, I don't know. This sounds like shit people were saying just from like reading the news.
Yeah, it could be something, it could be nothing. It's not even really worth mentioning because the guy seems to be holding on to it and drip feeding it.
I mean, it's always worth remembering that Donald Trump was good friends with Jeffrey Epstein and flew on that plane a whole bunch and allegedly shared some similar interests. Yeah, but yeah, this is just like.
Well, that's the thing, is the October surprise is dated because early voting starts in September, so yeah.
The closest thing we got to an October surprise was Mark Robinson. That whole saga was fucking
That was
great.
in September, though.
I know. Well, like you said,
Yeah, there you
early
go.
voting starts a lot earlier, so it's September surprise now. And Mark Robinson, oh boy.
Yeah. There really wasn't much else. There was a bunch of hype. And then even like conservatives were like drumming up some like, oh, don't believe your eyes when they drop this one.
Yeah.
Anyways, we've got one more political story for you guys today, and it's something we've been waiting for nearly 4 years. It has to do with the results of the last election. Since 2020, we've seen an endless stream of chuds get sent to prison for storming the U.S. Capitol to stop Congress from certifying the fact that Trump lost. This one is the Holy Grail. Fans of Mr. Show, Bob's Burgers, and plenty of other alt-comedy projects for the past few decades are familiar with the comedic acting talents of Jay Johnson. And they were shocked and bewildered flustered by the news that he was definitely at the Capitol on January 6th and had apparently fallen down quite a Trump rabbit hole in the years preceding.
It was so funny because, like, the sedition hunters put that guy's picture up, like, or no, it was the fucking FBI put his picture up on Twitter, like, a week or so after January 6th, and is like, can anyone help identify this? And a bunch of people were like, is that Jay Johnston from Mr. Show? No, couldn't possibly be.
There were some comedians that were like, yeah, he's been saying some weird shit for a couple of years now. So it matches up. And yeah, then other comedians, I believe, said that he told them he was going to D.C.
Yeah.
So wild. Well, now he's finally had his day in court. Here's Variety.
Jay Johnston, an actor with recurring roles in Bob's Burgers, Mr. Show, and Arrested Development, was sentenced to 12 months and 1 day in federal prison for his role in the January 6th Capitol attack, NBC News reports. Johnston was arrested in June 2023 and pleaded guilty 1 month later to a felony offense of obstructing officers during a civil disorder. The actor, whose credits also include Anchorman and Men in Black 2, was identified as a participant in the insurrection before he was arrested, resulting in him being fired from Bob's Burgers in December 2021. Johnston voiced Jimmy Pesto in 42 episodes of the animated comedy across 11 seasons.
Yeah, and as everyone pointed out, this is a very Jimmy Pesto.
Jimmy Pesto would support Trump and would storm the Capitol.
According to court documents obtained by Variety, Johnston flew from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. on January 5th, 2021 to attend the Stop the Steal rally. He stood near the police line while watching and filming rioters attack police. He also used a stolen U.S. Capitol Police riot shield to make a shield wall against the police and participated in a push that pinned and crushed a police officer against the door frame.
In the days following January 6th, Johnston sent messages to family and friends claiming the events of the Capitol were exaggerated by the media and that it was a setup by the police and Antifa, according to a sentencing memo. Almost 2 years after the attack, Johnston made light of his participation in the riot by dressing up as Jacob Chansley, known as the QAnon Shaman, at a Halloween party that he attended.
Again, yep, that's me. I believe all that shit. And you know what? This year, if I wasn't going to prison, I'd be in a trash bag, too.
The government, yeah, it's too bad that he won't be. I don't know. Maybe he probably still hasn't done one last ride.
Yeah.
Put me in the bag. The government sought an 18-month sentence for Johnston, noting his spread of disinformation about January 6th and his lack of remorse for participating in the riot. And yeah, the Halloween thing is the funniest detail for me because it's like, I'm sure his defense, him and his lawyer, just like, look,
we got a little carried away.
Things got out of hand. Like, Mr. Johnson, is this a photo of you a full year after January 6th, dressed up as the QAnon shaman for Halloween?
And I'm proud.
Yeah, that is me. So,
the lawyers just rubbing their temples. Oh, God. Anyways, that's enough politics for now. It is time to take our minds off this goddamn election. It's just for a brief moment. By covering some more typical non-election year weekly news. Let's start with some news about a very fat bear.
A big chungus of a bear.
We recently covered the annual Fat Bear Week competition up in Alaska, which this year was mired in controversy after one competitor killed another competitor. But bears all across the northern hemisphere are currently fattening up, and over in Colorado, local wildlife officials have been sharing trail cam footage of a particularly rotund bear who looks like he's perfectly well equipped for hibernation, but nevertheless continues to bulk up. Yeah, it's bulking season. Here's the Idaho State Police.
Everyone's favorite really fat bear is still on the hunt for food in Colorado, video shows. Colorado Parks and Wildlife's Southwest region shared a photo and videos of the enormous bear gorging himself on October 18th, dubbing him a thick boy and wondering how much more this black bear thinks he needs to eat before finding a den this year. McClatchy has previously reported. It's been a week since we posted this incredibly rotund bear from Durango, the agency said on X, formerly known as Twitter. Genuinely love everyone's responses and interactions with this post that has gained national attention. Well, we've got an update. Your favorite thick boy is still eating. Video submitted by a resident shows the giant bear foraging along the home's fence in the blaring light of the camera. The bear seems to notice the light, but turns around and keeps eating until the person filming shines it directly at him. Then the bear turns away and waddles very slowly off into the street.
We've seen one Netflix special already. I need another. I need Joey Chestnut versus Thick Boy.
What that bear can eat?
Jaws versus Thick Boy.
And it is funny, like, you know, the bears up in Alaska, they're having to actually hunt for, like, salmon and even turning to cannibalism at some points. It's a pretty, like, it's rough out there. But here in the lower 48, the black bears, they just go into town and it's a buffet.
It's Colorado. It's a stoner bear, baby.
They can
food and.
Hostiles have captured the hard point.
Do you think Joey Chestnut eats a whole bunch and then hibernates? Do you think that's how it works?
I know when I eat a lot of food, I want to take a nap.
The article continues. He's got no shame. We are here for it, the agency said. We only get so many winners to sleep through. No need to leave a calorie on the field. He must have. The second video shows the bear facing the other way and chowing down on foliage, lining the fence as he periodically glances back towards the camera. He's like us on Office Barbecue Day, the agency said. Looking around to see if anyone noticed we had already had a burger and a brat before we reload the plate. Some in the comments defended the bear's huge appetite. He's gotta last all winter. Let him live, someone said. Others praised him. You don't get that big by being a quitter, someone said. He's just so fat. Love it, another person said. What a great king. And yeah, that's a big fucking bear. So good for him.
Yeah, he's a big boy, and I think like it's actually you want your bears this fat because they're gonna have trouble chasing you down.
Yeah. The problem
They're gonna get winded.
The problem is that climate change is making the winters shorter.
Yeah, it's fucking things up badly. It's all heading in a bad direction. It's also bad that bears have become so socialized to living next to human civilization that they are forgetting how to, hunt and support themselves. But ignoring all that, this is pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a big fat bear. We love big fat bears.
He's a thick boy.
But let's move on now to one of our favorite recurring topics on this show. Japanese people solving very real problems in very strange ways. Just last week, we covered the rise of resignation agencies in Japan that quit people's jobs for them when they're too scared to do it themselves. And this week, we have some news about a novel new solution to Japan's declining birth rate problem. His name is Elon Musk.
No.
Oh, no. Okay, here's NBC News. With most of the population gone, residents of one village in Japan have come up with a novel plan to make it less lonely, replacing people with puppets. Fewer than 60 people live in Ichinono, and most of them are past retirement age as younger people have moved away for jobs or education. So using old clothes, fabrics, and mannequins, residents have stitched together their own population of puppets to keep them company. Some of the puppets ride swings. Others push firewood carts, smiling eerily at visitors. We're probably outnumbered by puppets, Hisao Yamazaki, an 88-year-old widow, told the Agence France-Presse news agency.
And yeah, that is certainly one solution to the problem of not having any children around. It's like children of men over there.
Get it done.
It has to be creepy when you roll into town, though.
Yeah, especially at night. But these people are old. I don't think they're doing much driving. Plus, Japanese villages.
For visitors.
Oh, well, I don't think they're getting a lot of visitors.
Now they will. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be going looking for Puppet Town now.
So yeah, these weird scarecrow-looking mannequins all over town, they're sure to rejuvenate the youthful spirit that this village is severely lacking
Given up
in.
the lead.
Anyway, it continues. Japan's median age has been rising since 1950, with the figure reaching to 49.1 in 2023, according to an estimate by the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. So in Ichinono, the dolls are injecting some youth. Amid the overgrown greenery, a puppet girl wearing a sweater hood sways gently on a wooden swing, as if caught between stillness and life. Her friend, a boy with a big, warming smile, stands on a scooter ready to go. Nearby, another puppet girl in a red helmet has been placed on a bike. Elsewhere, two life-size mannequins in farming clothes stand by an open metal tent in a crop field. The one on the left, in a hat and coat, leans forward, while another one in an orange jacket stands nearby. Under leafless trees in another part of the village, a family of 3 puppets collects wood and puts the logs in a smart cart.
Okay.
This is sad.
It is. It's like how they sell those fake cats at the CVS.
For old people?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they can't be trusted with a real cat that they have to feed, clean up after. Yeah.
Anyway, they also report that a young family moved to the village once COVID lockdown ended and remote work became more common. And they had a son who is the first baby to be born there in over 20 years. So maybe eventually there won't be any need for these child-sized dolls being everywhere in the town if more people follow suit. But great to be that kid. You got everyone in the whole town looking out for you.
So many grandparents.
Yeah. That kid's going to be treated like a god.
But no friends other than dolls. Giant dolls.
I could be your friend. It's good for the old people. Probably not good for the kid. But in the meantime, the only other kids in town for that kid to play with, they are, unfortunately, puppets.
RCXD moving
which
out.
is kind of the same upbringing that Elon Musk's son is going to have.
Yeah, robots.
Yeah. Just other old people in the room going, He's the chosen one.
I mean, like, so Honda had that Osimo robot like 20 years ago, and never got that advanced. It was mostly just like a gigantic like toddler just sort of walking around.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point they could probably make a small version of that, and it doesn't need to like fucking do anything. It doesn't need to do chores. Just make a robot that is the size and functionality of a 2-year-old and send it to Japan. Well, they're already in Japan. The Honda Corporation is. So just send them into these villages and put a little, clothes.
You're turning this entire town into not a scary version, but a haunted house where they're just on like motors going like this.
Yeah.
Or like jumping out, except they like offer you something. Hello, I'm nice.
Yeah, just put little hidden speakers in the bushes of like children laughing. It's
Certainly
just
not,
like the old days.
Not creepy at all.
Yeah.
Definitely very cool.
Takes me back.
Anyways, before we move on to the headlines after the show, it's time to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Turtle Beach, the #1 brand in gaming headsets and accessories.
I like Turtle Beach.
I do too. It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a gamer was stirring because they were dialed in wearing their brand new Turtle Beach headset. Seriously, they won't even hear Santa coming down the chimney with these things on. They are that good. Turtle Beach's Gen 3 Stealth 700 headset is the cheat code for giving the best gift of the year. They get to stop sounding like they're talking underwater, and you get to be the holiday MVP. Crystal clear sound, maximum comfort, and the ability to hear every little detail in their game is a much better gift than socks and a mug. And with a long-lasting battery of 80 hours, you can be sure not to run out anytime soon.
Whether you're treating yourself or looking for that perfect gift, now's the time to snag the headset that everyone's talking about. For a limited time only, our viewers get 10% off your entire order when you use the code WEEKLYWEIRD, all one word, at turtlebeach.com. That's 10% off your order at turtlebeach.com with promo code WEEKLYWEIRD. Turtle Beach just sent us our own Stealth 700s to try out, and oh boy, we have been loving the comfort, sound quality, battery life. This is a damn good headset, and that 80 hours of battery life is no joke. We've all got that one friend whose headset's always seeming to die when you're down to the last 2 teams. Not with this one. Turtle Beach's Stealth 700 headset has an insane 80-hour battery life with quick charge, so you rarely have to think about charging it.
The Stealth 700 has the industry's first ever cross-play dual wireless transmitter system, and that means you can seamlessly switch between your consoles and PC with just a click of a button, and it gets even better. While being connected to your console, the Stealth 700 can connect with your phone for music streaming or taking calls at the same time. Multitask. Get your work and your gaming done at the same time. Listen to your favorite songs. Do it while gaming. All done with the Stealth 700.
Read a book while gaming.
Do whatever you want with these headsets. Turtle Beach doesn't just have amazing headsets, though. They also have every gaming accessory you could ever want, and they're all high quality at prices that really break the bank. From flight and racing simulators to controllers to keyboards and mice, Turtle Beach is the ultimate gaming cheat code. Get the ultimate immersive gaming experience today with Turtle Beach. For a limited time only, head to turtlebeach.com and use our code WEEKLYWEIRD, all one word, for 10% off your entire order. That's 10% off your order at turtlebeach.com with promo code WEEKLYWEIRD. Don't delay. Get the perfect gift now.
Yeah, it's Christmas time.
But now let's get into a gift of our own. A gift to you.
The gift of news.
The weirdest, craziest headlines from around the world this week, starting with
Wisconsin pizzeria error led dozens to eat cannabis oil pizza.
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, when this happens, that would be terrifying.
It'd be fun for some people, but for most people, a completely terrifying experience.
If you don't know you've ingested cannabis or any other drug and you start experiencing the effects seemingly out of nowhere,
you think you're dying.
Yeah, it's not fun. But I guess what happened here, this was not someone being mischievous. No, they went down to their local, I guess they share like a warehouse, giant walk-in fridge with like a bunch of other restaurants. They went down there, and I guess one of the other restaurants had some like Delta 9 oil that they were selling with their food items. And yeah, the pizza guy just grabbed it and was like, oil. Yep.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
And I'm curious how much he used, because pizza has a lot of oil. Probably more oil than most foods where you would use cannabis oil. So these people might have gotten very high.
Yeah, very, very messed up. Snoop Dogg confirms he has a staffer who makes sure people he's smoking marijuana with don't get too high.
I like that.
Good for him.
Yeah, that's smart because, yeah, a lot of, Snoop Dogg, he says he smokes like 80 joints a day, which
insane.
Is too much.
That's a lot. That's not good for your health in general because it's a lot of smoke.
Yeah, but...
it's good that he has like a a trip person.
Yeah, especially like if I'm smoking with Snoop Dogg, I'm gonna be careful. But it's nice to know that there's someone else looking out for me. Like, all right, buddy, you get the tap. You're done. So very cool.
Very nice of him to do. Because you don't, if you're Snoop Dogg, you don't want to have some that people passing out around you all the time.
No.
Asshole.
You don't want people getting couch stuck. But I don't know if this is the same guy he pays like $50K a year to just roll his joints. Maybe it's a different guy.
Yeah, maybe.
He's got a whole marijuana staff.
Everyone's getting work.
Hostile UAV
Russia finds Google. Oh God.
It's like $20 decimillion.
I think it's $20 decillion.
Decillion, yeah.
That is a 20 with a couple dozen zeros at the end of it. So,
well, if they settle for just $1 trillion, then I think Russia's going to make out okay.
Yeah, I think so.
You're ahead, but stay
this
alert.
is all because YouTube banned some like Russian propaganda YouTube channels like a couple years ago, and yeah, the Russian government, they're like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
This is like thousands times more, and a million times more than the amount of money that like exists in the world.
Yeah. Well, that's because they added interest on it. So, and compounding
inflation.
Interest, yeah.
Joe Biden's economy. Vladimir Putin's economy.
Drunk animals far more common than previously thought, scientists say.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, alcohol occurs naturally. Yeah. It's the same way humans discovered alcohol by, like, eating some
fermented
fruit that was out for too long.
Yeah. And so we do the same thing.
Yeah, it's silly to think that we're the only ones who are like, hey, that's pretty cool. We should do that again. And yeah, they looked into it and they're like, yeah, a ton of animals like specifically seek out alcohol for a variety of purposes. Not necessarily to just like get drunk and feel good, but it sounds like a lot of apes do that.
Yeah.
They're kicking back after a hard day swinging from the trees.
Yeah. So open a cold one. And by that, I mean some fruit been sitting out too long.
Yeah.
Or as we've seen in multiple videos over the years, just taking tourist drinks and drinking them. And
they like it.
Around.
They've developed a taste for it.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
it's not good.
Just like the bears.
You shouldn't give animals alcohol. They will find it themselves in the wild.
I mean, to be fair, these people aren't giving the animals the alcohol. They're stealing it from them directly.
I think some people are probably getting a kick out of it.
I'm sure they are.
Oh no, he stole my beer.
Oh
jeez.
I hope he doesn't drink it and stumble around with plenty on it.
100-kilogram wild boar causes chaos in train station, bites man's arm in toilet.
You see, I already know this didn't happen in America because of the kilograms,
and calling a bathroom a toilet.
And we would have shot this wild boar with 10,000 guns.
Yeah, I mean, they did kill the boar. This was in South Korea. And yeah, really exciting day at the train station. The boar came on through and then said, fuck you in particular, and ran into the men's room and bit a guy.
On the toilet.
Yeah, I'm just gonna assume he was sitting down taking a shit. The boar busts through the door to the bathroom and then busts through the stall door. Takes a bite out of him and then back on.
Honey, you're never gonna believe what happened to me at work today. When I was going on my way and then a boar broke in, bit me. And then also a demon scratched me.
Yeah, this is what's going to be happening in America on a daily basis if, one, we don't stop the boars, and two, we embrace mass transit.
Yeah.
The reason this doesn't happen in America, no trains.
That's right.
So is this
no
what you want?
Stations for them to break
Is this what you want, liberals?
40 to 50 wild hogs in a train station? I don't think so.
No.
Whale orgy off southern Australia, a promising sign for southern right species.
I mean, it is a good sign because they whaled this specific species down to like a couple hundred, and now they've finally bounced back like 100 years later. But yeah, I guess they just do a big orgy in the middle of the sea.
That's great.
The women are like, all right, boys. And then they have like
I
think they basically have a gangbang where all the boys take their turn and then the best swimmers win.
Whale bukkake.
And
whale gangbang.
None of the men know who's the father, so they raise it together like Mamma Mia.
Good for them.
And yeah.
What's funny about this is like the military, they got so many sound sensors down there. They're probably listening in on this whale orgy the entire time.
Yeah, I wonder what it sounds like.
Probably sounds very violent. But before they're able to listen to it, they put the headphones on, and then it's like you start hearing the whale spawn. And all of a sudden, an ad about how Trump's going to ban all this whale porn.
Yeah, hey, I was listening to that.
Yeah,
what the hell?
Defund our whale orgy.
Why do we have to make everything political? Colorado Springs tattoo shop paints penis mural on roof to piss off neighbor. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, it's probably just some like you know, we've all seen spray paint tags of dicks. It's very crude. No, this is a tattoo shop, and these are artists.
Yeah.
And this is quite a mural. And the mural addresses the conflict because I guess like the tattoo shop is next to an apartment building.
Yeah, they built it and blocked the view.
The apartment, like people park in the alleyway next to the tattoo shop, but the apartment landlord keeps getting those people towed. And so it's a mural of like a giant penis driving a tow truck, towing another penis in a car, and then there's all these other penises like, oh no.
Yeah.
It's just like there's like so many dicks on this, and all the people up in the high-rise apartment, every time they look out their window, they see a whole lot of dicks.
Yeah. Well, tough shit.
Yeah.
That's part of the lovely neighborhood. Enjoy.
Maybe you let people park their cars and the dicks go away.
Huntington Beach Review Board deems potty training books inappropriate for children.
Cool.
We're doing great, folks. We love to.
Huntington Beach is... It's so weird. I grew up in Orange County. I knew a lot of people as a kid from Huntington Beach who were all very normal. And it wasn't until much later I was like, oh, this is like the psycho capital of Southern California.
Yeah.
This is where all the psychos live.
Yeah.
It's like a little like Trump land in the middle of otherwise pretty like moderate area. Orange County used to be a pretty Republican area, but it's not anymore. It's pretty purple. But yeah, I guess potty training books depict children, you know, dropping their pants and sitting their naked ass on a toilet. And that's very pornographic.
Sniper down.
And we're
Can't
gonna
have that.
we're not only just gonna pull this from the library, we're gonna send whoever made it to prison, just like we would for any other type of pornography. So good luck learning not to shit your pants, kids, because you're just gonna have to pull yourself up by your diaper straps.
That's right.
Nice.
Florida
We're pulling
teen
ahead.
with machete arrested for voter intimidation at polling place. Florida boy. We've heard so much from Florida man over the years, but Florida boy is taking after his father.
Triggering scout pulse.
And yeah, that's the thing about this election that really throws me off, makes me not know what the fuck's gonna happen. Is there's a bunch of like shithead fucking like 19-year-olds
Yeah.
who love Trump. And this dude showed up at a polling place. We saw some like women outside, you know, the mandatory 100 feet away with like Harris signs. It was just like swinging a machete at them, having a laugh, like not actually like. It was very threatening. I don't think he would have done anything, but yeah.
That's a bunch of the problems with all of these Trump supporters. They don't understand how they are perceived.
Yeah.
They don't understand that they are perceived as a threat because people
free speech.
People are, first of all, on edge. They don't understand that look, what you're doing is a threat. It is.
Yeah,
It is
it's very
intimidation.
threatening.
But in their brains, they're like, oh, I'm just joking. And it's like, okay, well, no one knows that you're joking, and also that's just a very convenient excuse. But the people that you're antagonizing are people that are constantly antagonizing you, like, and you're not aware of that.
Yeah.
So when they see this, it is perceived as a threat.
Anyway, he got charged with like a pretty serious felony.
Yeah, good.
He's looking at potentially some time. I'm sure he'll get off pretty lightly, being young and no prior record. But like, yeah, you can't do that. You can't wave a machete at people while you're standing next to them in a threatening way. That is a crime. And I'm just curious whether he got to vote yet, because there's been multiple examples so far of like Trump people like going to the polling place wearing fucking MAGA gear, which you're not allowed to do, and then being told to leave, and then like freaking the fuck out and getting themselves arrested before they have a chance to vote.
There was one video where the guy's like, "Why are you so offended?" And they're like, "Sir, we're not offended. It's against the law to wear
There's
political
no
merchandise in here."
politicking at the polling place.
Yeah.
It's the rule. And final headline: self-proclaimed witches say spells won't work against Trump.
Oh,
We've tried all of our spells. We've put everything we can think of in that cauldron. He's got some sort of force field around him.
that's right. Well, damn. Even the witches can't get to him.
We've tried everything, and
Nothing's working.
sticks.
No.
He's there.
You're just gonna have to vote.
I'd like to see old Donnie Trump wriggle his way out of this witch's spell.
Yeah.
And then he wriggles away easily.
Yeah, the movie ends
Every
5
time.
minutes in.
Damn.
Well, folks, we're gonna have another episode before the election, obviously, but
Set your calendars.
we do have our election night live stream coming up. It is on Tuesday, It is at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern when the stuff starts rolling in. And we're just going to be sitting around talking about what's led up to this, watching as states are called, seeing how things are playing out, maybe being joined by some guests, and just kind of suffering together. So commiserate with us.
Yeah.
We'll probably have
Gonna be a long night.
up before then, but we'll leave a link to the live stream as well. But before you go, please like the video, give it a like, leave a comment, make sure you're subscribed, and try to take it easy this week. It's like the calm before the storm. Think of it that way. Even with how crazy things are, it might get crazier, so just enjoy your weekend.
Yeah.
Please. There's other videos that are popping up now. Trump was a garbage man and other videos. So check that out, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I just think we need to kill them, every one of them, and that's it. And if not that, because the country will not let that happen, the government. Just, the least we can do is just kick them out of our land. Because this is our home, this is our land, and we deserve it.
Yeah, I think colonialism gets a bad rap. Like, genocide is bad, but colonizing places that are genocidal and they have bad ideology, it's good to come in and correct their views.
Sound like you're advocating for ethnic cleansing?
I don't think so, because Palestinian isn't an ethnicity, it's an ideology, and it's an ideology that says that they want Jews dead, and so we want them as far away from Jews as possible.
As the Israeli military begins its third attempt at ethnic cleansing northern Gaza, Israeli civilians are preparing for their shot at capturing real estate. You would assume that because everything we're about to look at is in violation of international law, that they would be conducting these meetings in secret. They are not meeting in secret, though. In fact, they are openly advertising it, broadcasting it in the media, and doing so with direct support from the Israeli government. Last week, Daniela Weiss hosted this event in Masaf Habazak, just miles from northern Gaza.
Do you feel like this is your political moment?
It's not a moment. It's the beginning of an era.
Weiss is one of the heads of the Nakala settlement movement, a West Bank settlement group comprised of and endorsed by some of the most powerful people in Israel. And this group has turned its colonizing gaze to the settlement of northern Gaza. From a young age, the children of these settler movements are brought up to believe that Gaza is their rightful home, and that there's only one way to reclaim this home, which is by cleansing it of the Palestinian people already living there.
When you have a cut in your body, and that cut, it has an infection. You have to take out the infection. When you take out the infection, then it'll be clean again.
There's a concerted effort in Israeli media to try to portray these settlers as some kind of extremists, ones that adhere to a fringe ideology. However, among Israelis, the idea of settling the Gaza Strip is becoming increasingly popular.
There is some reliable polling that suggests that between 25 and 40% of the population here supports some form of settlement inside Gaza. The awful trauma of October the 7th attacks have pushed those figures towards the upper end.
I love the implication of what he said there, which is that ethnic cleansing is some kind of trauma response, as if their genocidal ideology would be fixed if they just went to therapy. Unsurprisingly, this push to settle Gaza also has a lot of support from within the Israeli government. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security, is the strongest ally of this new settler movement. To give you an idea of the type of guy Ben-Gvir is, as recently as 2020, he had a portrait of an Israeli mass shooter hanging in his home. Baruch Goldstein, perpetrator of the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre in 1994 in Hebron, where he walked into a mosque and shot and killed 29 Muslims worshipping there. This guy is who is hanging on the Minister of National Security's wall. Also, apparently 10% of Israeli Jews think that Baruch Goldstein is a national hero. There's a fun fact for you, I guess. So what would these future settlements look like? And for that, we can look to the West Bank, where there already exist hundreds of illegal settlements, where they are bulldozing Palestinian homes to replace them with Israeli ones every year. In the past year alone, almost 1,700 Palestinian homes were destroyed to make way for more Israeli settlements. The destruction of these homes, while sometimes done under the auspices of building code violations, is generally done by armed Israeli settlers themselves, often with direct protection provided by the IDF. Armed settlers with the active participation of army units repeatedly cut off road access and raid Palestinian communities, detain, assault, and torture residents, and chase them out of their homes and off their lands at gunpoint, or coerce them to leave with death threats while blocking them from taking their belongings. These attacks aren't new and have been happening long before October 7th. According to Human Rights Watch, settler attacks on Palestinians increased in 2023 to their highest level since the UN began recording this data in 2006. And again, that was before October 7th.
This video shows Israeli settlers attacking Palestinian olive pickers and destroying their property, beating and chasing them in the fields. Ilham shows me where settlers have put straw in her family's trees. They use it to set light to them. Some are hundreds of years old. She says settler attacks have increased since the start of the war.
The level of violence has increased. They've stopped even talking to us now. They just come and beat us. Some open fire, killing people. There is no way they will ever entertain even the thought of a mutual understanding between us.
One of the latest victims of this conflict, not killed in Gaza, but a hillside village in the West Bank. Grief and anger after a 23-year-old Palestinian was shot dead by Jewish settler extremists as they attacked the community of Jit last night.
To make this clear, if you are an Israeli, you can gather your friends, go to the West Bank, and commit whatever atrocities you'd like. Seize homes, shoot at families, burn fields, and you will more than likely have full protection from any repercussions, and in addition, full military support. Settler attacks are rarely even acknowledged, let alone punished. This sort of violence and expansion is viewed as more of a feature than a bug of the Israeli state. The more Palestinians they drive off the land, the more settlements can be built, thus increasing the chances that Israel can expand its borders. It has taken decades of international pressure to even begin to apply generally meaningless sanctions to settlers, like freezing their American bank accounts and barring them from business dealings in the United States. The government itself is taking steps to accelerate this process. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich recently demanded Israeli sovereignty over the entire region at an Israeli conference for American evangelicals. Israel must free itself from wrong concepts and make an unequivocal Israeli statement to the Arabs and the entire world that a Palestinian state will not be established through the establishment of new cities and settlements deep in the West Bank and bringing hundreds of thousands of additional settlers to live in them. This sovereignty would allow Israeli control over Gaza for an indefinite and inevitably endless period of time. Just like in the West Bank, settler terror mobs would descend on the strip in an attempt to strip the last shreds of dignity from the Palestinians living there and clear space in the rubble for more newer, illegitimate Israeli real estate. This open violation of international law is only possible because each time the Israeli government moves to further legitimize these settlements, the United States, its most powerful ally, makes empty appeals to its concerns while taking no tangible or material steps to actually stop them. None of this would be possible if not for direct support from the United States, with groups like Keep Israel Safe, who fundraise for these settlements and send it to Israel directly.
Nahalal gets support from a number of groups in the U.S., including AFSI, Americans for a Safe Israel, which co-sponsored a recent webinar on the return to Gush Katif.
There's few things I can think of that are less safe than setting up a neighborhood illegally in an active genocide zone. In a way, this could also be understood as settlers acting as human shields for the IDF. The closer and sooner these settlers can move towards any of the fighting, the more of an excuse they have in their minds to ethnically cleanse Palestinians further and further south. This movement is supported by wealthy Americans, but according to Vice, their anonymity must be protected.
There is a very strong support from very prominent, from very, I would say, wealthy people, wealthy Jews
in the U.S.
In the U.S.
Can you name any names?
No, I cannot. No.
I would be willing to guess that this protection is less about hiding their support for the Zionist project and more that they are violating international law by funneling money directly into groups that build these illegal settlements. And again, to get an idea of the types of people we're dealing with here, the funds raised by these groups don't just go to the settler movements, they also go to the IDF and the sniper units specifically. This is probably the most direct way you can send your money there to kill kids, given the IDF snipers' long and storied history of clear, deliberate targeting of civilians. This past year, you saw dozens of doctors all report multiple instances of treating children that had been shot directly in their hearts and skulls. That's the snipers, and that's what these people are funding. Unfortunately, it's looking like these settlers might have their way, as Israel's general's plan for northern Gaza is currently in full effect, despite the U.S.'s impotent gestures to withhold military aid if they did it. The safety of the people living in Gaza has reached an all-time low, and it's only going to get worse. The general's plan also ramps up Israel's intentional starvation efforts to an extreme degree. Hundreds of trucks trucks have already been turned away daily by the Israeli blockade. And then days ago, you saw that UNRWA, the largest organization providing that aid, was banned from operating within Israel by the Israeli government. This move has been described by human rights groups as a death sentence for the people still alive in Gaza. 83% of required food aid does not make it into Gaza, which is up from 34% in 2023. This reduction means people in Gaza have gone from having an average of 2 meals a day to just 1 meal every other day. An estimated 50,000 children aged between 6 and 59 months urgently require treatment for malnutrition by the end of the year. It is becoming increasingly likely that Israel will remain unimpeded in its mission to ethnically cleanse the north of the Gaza Strip, and in doing so, clear the way for settler access to Lebensraum and the expansion of its illegal occupation. In 1948, the State of Israel was established after over 700,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from their land and homes in what's known as the Nakba. These settlers have, for the past year, consistently and publicly called for a new Nakba, and unless the world does something to stop it, they will get what they want.
Hostiles have the hard point.
Slightest. For Gaza, however, it seems that there is way more to say about the official death toll, even though it includes no estimations and no extrapolations. Even the tiniest, most inconsequential errors are weaponized for denial. Imagine the furor that would be picked up if Palestinians said that their actual death toll was 10 times higher. The way this denial even usually functions is by first insisting that the Gaza Ministry of Health just innately cannot be trusted because it is Hamas. So a civilian organization, according to this argument, should just have everything that it says discarded out of hand because of the governing party of the territory in which it operates. This has some obvious issues because whether they really are Hamas or not, you still have to actually respond to the list that they have produced on its own merits, rather than just insist that it be ignored based on who is producing it. And their death counts have been proven reliable many times in the past, so there's no logical reason to just discard their work now and assume that they are suddenly making everything up this time. Then if you aren't entirely convinced by their insistence that you just throw out the death toll entirely based on who produced it, then they move on to demanding that it be discounted, which doesn't meet some impossible standards that they invented specifically for this instance, which they have never applied anywhere else, and which are never applied anywhere else. They arbitrarily take issue with the methodology used, presenting it as if there is something just sort of self-evidently wrong with it, without giving our audience any point of comparison for what they think a good example of what acceptable methodology would be. This can only work because most people are unfamiliar with this topic. They have no idea how conflict deaths are usually counted or estimated, so they simply don't know that the actual fact is that the practices being used in Gaza are in reality far above the usual standards. An illustrative example of someone who does this is John Spencer, a pro-Israel propagandist who has become something of a referent recently in the Gaza death toll denial movement. And you don't need to take my word for that. His pinned tweet is a video of Benjamin Netanyahu himself praising him. He's not exactly pretending to be neutral. In this tweet, Spencer confidently asserts that the Gaza Ministry of Health's death toll is not reliable, linking a report by the most unbiased source imaginable to back his assertion up: UK Lawyers for Israel. So on what basis does he insist that it's unreliable? Well, because according to him, it includes the names of the dead taken from media reports and people who have been reported dead by family members through an online form. As I've made clear numerous times already, the practices that he's insisting are unreliable there actually go far above and beyond normal standards for counting conflict dead, and especially normal standards for estimating them, and especially during a still ongoing conflict. To exclude people reported dead in news reports or by family members would mean literally only counting actual corpses that have been cited in person by Ministry of Health staff. A ridiculous standard not demanded on any other party in any other conflict ever. Whatever minor errors might result from a couple of incorrect news reports or a family jumping the gun and reporting someone who's missing dead when they're actually still alive will be totally insignificant in the long run compared to the far higher number of real dead that using additional methods like that will allow them to identify. That said, while it would be fine to do that, the Gaza Ministry of Health doesn't actually use news reports. This is a lie that comes from a mistranslation of a Ministry of Health announcement which in reality said that they had started using non-medical staff, such as public relations and media employees, to help them with searching for, finding, and identifying people's remains. Nothing to do with news reports. And about the family reports, this one is especially egregious. I wonder what Mr. Spencer and the other denialists would think about the fact that the vast majority of Yad Vashem's 4.8 million named Jewish victims of the Holocaust were only identified thanks to the very same sort of reports from family and friends that they denounce as unreliable in the case of Gaza. 2.7 million of them were identified in that way, and to this day, you are able to fill out a form on their website to file such a report, just like you can on the Gaza Ministry of Health's website, though the Gaza Ministry of Health standards are actually higher still, since they are cross-checked against the present-day Gaza Population Registry database. Will they be telling us about how the number of Holocaust dead is unreliable next? After all, it would only make sense to apply the same standards that they're applying to Gaza that they claim to neutrally abide by to every event, right? But of course they won't. They're just going to keep doing what pro-Israel propagandists specialize in and what I have talked about a lot in my videos about Israeli propaganda on this channel. Decontextualization. They rely on the fact that most people have, of course, never stopped to say, I wonder how they count the dead in conflicts, in order to present the practices in Gaza as if they are unacceptable and render the count invalid, when the exact opposite is actually true. This baseless propaganda is then spread far and wide, and reported on by mainstream media outlets as if it's not ridiculous, as well as, of course, being parroted by other stupid and malicious Israel supporters who have no interest in applying even the most basic standard of critical analysis to such assertions, like YouTubers. Now let's talk a bit about the situation on the ground in Gaza, how it affects the Ministry of Health's ability to account for the dead, and what it indicates about the real death counts. Here is a map based on satellite imagery of the destruction that Israel has caused in Gaza. You can clearly see that most built-up areas of Gaza, which is where the most people live, have been destroyed. And guess what? This map is from December of 2023. 2 months into the assault, 10 more months have since passed, and undoubtedly, even more of Gaza has since been destroyed. In May 2024, the UN estimated that 370,000 housing units had been damaged or destroyed. That is 70% of all residential dwellings in Gaza, and that was 4 months ago at the time that I record this. For comparison, the notably intense carpet bombing of Germany in World War II only destroyed or damaged around 45% of the housing stock in its major cities. The notion that the Ministry of Health's figures could possibly be overinflated given these facts is pretty self-evidently absurd. Houses are where people live, so damaging and destroying 70% of the housing in a place where more than 2 million people live is very obviously going to kill significantly more than just the 40-odd thousand people who have thus far been included in the Ministry of Health's official count. And Israel knows this too, which is why they have done everything they possibly can to destroy the Palestinians' capacity to count as many of their dead as possible. They have been specifically targeting Gaza's hospitals, and especially the Al-Shifa hospital, which is the most important hospital in the region, and crucially, the headquarters of the Ministry of Health teams that are responsible for counting the dead, as well as the location of the central data centers, where the population and death registries are maintained and updated. Or at least it was, until the hospital was attacked and pretty much totally destroyed by Israel. Israel justified its multiple attacks on Al-Shifa with ridiculous claims like it's a Hamas military base, producing nothing but absurd animated propaganda videos to back up that claim, which they then never even remotely substantiated after they had actually occupied the hospital. It's clear now that their particular obsession with Al-Shifa was in part motivated by the fact that they wanted to impede the Ministry of Health's ability to account for the dead, because their regular reports on the death toll, incomplete as they are, were making Israel look very bad. Hell, even Western media outlets, who are usually very friendly to Israel, were happy to cite these figures, given the Ministry of Health's long-standing reputation for accuracy. And that was unacceptable for Israel. Countless witnesses state that when Israel raided Al-Shifa hospital in March 2024, Israeli troops checked ID cards and took anyone who they claimed worked for Hamas away for immediate summary execution. In Gaza, Hamas is obviously the governing party, so every single government employee technically works for Hamas, whether they are like a doctor, a bureaucrat, or whatever. They're obviously not militants, but civilians. Nonetheless, the Israelis just immediately executed them. So Israel intentionally targeted the place where the work for counting the dead was carried out, and aside from just completely destroying the hospital and rendering it inoperable, and thus obviously greatly hindering the Ministry of Health's ability to count the dead, they also killed Ministry of Health staff. And now, after that, pro-Israel propaganda insists that the count is unreliable and should just be discarded out of hand. But hey, you know what? It probably is unreliable, because given how much their ability to count the dead has been hampered, it makes no sense to assume that they're suddenly overcounting the dead. It would make way more sense to assume that they are now undercounting them even more than they were before. And this is a trend during active conflicts and also after active conflicts anyway. They are pretty much always undercounts. So given the circumstances and the extremely high standards that are nonetheless being maintained by the Gaza Ministry of Health despite them, their death count should not be treated with any suspicion at all. In fact, it should be treated as an absolute bare minimum. And guess what? There is also very clear, very strong evidence that their death count was already a substantial undercount even before Israel's ground invasion and their attacks on the Al-Shifa hospital heavily hindered their ability to count the dead. Air Wars, which is a not-for-profit organization which tracks harm to civilians in conflicts globally, scoured social media for evidence of violent deaths in Gaza from October 7th to October 24th. Very early into the assault, they were able to find clear evidence of 3,259 civilian deaths in that time period from social media alone. To emphasize the significance of that is clearly not an exhaustive count of the dead. It's just what they were able to find by searching for publicly available social media posts where family or friends of the dead had announced the deaths of their loved ones. Of these 3,259 deaths that they were able to confirm on social media, only 75% of them appeared in the official Gaza Ministry of Health's list of the dead, providing clear evidence that, even before the breakdown in reporting capacity that came months later, there was a substantial amount of dead who were already missing from the official count. This is entirely expected because this is what always happens with casualty counts in such events. An official count that is based solely on counting actual dead bodies and family or friend reports, not based on any sort of estimations or extrapolations, is always going to end up being an undercount, and sometimes very substantially so. There is absolutely no reason to assume that this is not also the case in Gaza, especially given that what I just went over is clear evidence indicating as such. Solely from looking at social media, one tiny organization was able to find more than 700 victims who were at that time missing from the official Gaza Ministry of Health list of the dead. If that was the case back then, when the Ministry of Health was still operating at maximum efficiency, then it's doubtless that Air Wars was really only scratching the surface here, as obviously every death is not going to just be announced on publicly searchable social media profiles. So the bare minimum estimate for the number of dead in Gaza since October 7, 2023 should actually not be a Ministry of Health's official death count. It should be the official number plus 25%. Right now, that would be around 51,000 dead in total. And that's a low ball. A significantly higher number of dead who aren't included in the official count is even more likely. Is it 50%, 75%, 100%? 200%? It's impossible to know for sure, and it will likely remain so for a long time yet. But what is most important here is that the idea that the official figures are an overcount is pretty evidently ridiculous. They are in reality certainly an undercount, and the only real question up for honest debate is by how much. Another talking point that these denialists like to use is the claim that the official list hides the fact, according to them, that almost all of the male dead on it are actually Hamas militants. This is part of a strategy that Israel has been using since the beginning of their assault, where they try to blur the line between civilian and combatants to justify the absurdly high civilian death rate in Gaza. The most recently released official list of the dead is sorted by age, so it begins with 14 pages of nothing but babies under 1 year old. In total, 52% of the dead on the list are women and children, and around 4% are elderly, for a total of 56% who are from demographics that are very unlikely to be combatants. And that doesn't mean that the remaining 44% who are so-called military-aged men are combatants either, because as should be obvious, every single adult, non-elderly male is not a combatant. And if they're killing so many women, children, and elderly people, then it's a given that they're also killing a whole lot of civilian men as well, especially because there is a trend in modern conflict where a significant majority of the civilian deaths are adult males. A good point of comparison to use here is the still ongoing Syrian civil war. A number of different organizations attempt to count the death toll of that conflict. One of the most prominent of these, which is regularly
Securing
cited in
Zone A.
mainstream media, is the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, whose figures we'll be looking at here. Their death figures seem to lack the same level of transparency that the Gaza Ministry of Health figures have, as I couldn't find anything like the extensive and easy-to-find lists of the names of the dead, which are released every couple of months for Gaza. Facts are out there, but if they are, they're not nearly as accessible. They mostly just release numbers without lists of names to correspond to them. Numbers which then tend to be reported on without any question in Western media, and which I've never really seen anyone question at all, actually, despite this comparatively lower level of transparency. Note that I am not questioning the accuracy of these figures in any way. I'm merely comparing the quality of evidence that is provided in these two cases to show how unreasonably high these standards are for Palestinians in comparison. In March 2024, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights released a report stating that they had, up until that point, counted 507,000 named dead and estimated that there were a further 110,000 dead who they had not been able to identify, providing another example of what I've been saying throughout this video, that there are always more victims who are unaccounted for and who might never be accounted for. Of this total of 617,000, they state that 164,000 were civilians. That's 26% of the total, with the other 74% being combatants. Already, we can see clearly that the proportion of civilians killed by Israel in Gaza is undoubtedly far higher than those who have been killed in Syria, given that 56% of the dead in Gaza are from groups that are highly unlikely to contain significant numbers of combatants, compared to 26% of the deaths in Syria being with civilians. But the situation in Gaza looks even worse when you consider the proportion of civilian deaths in Syria who were adult males, a whopping 74%. 15% were children compared to 33% in Gaza, and 9% were women compared to 18% in Gaza. This data abides by a wider trend. It's normal for there to be a disproportionate amount of men among the civilian dead, because women and children are more likely to be evacuated first, men are more likely to stay behind for a number of reasons, they are more likely to be a part of rescue operations, and other such endeavors that make them more likely to be in harm's way, and it's also far more likely for civilian men to be killed because they are wrongly assumed to be combatants, or because they are perceived as a threat even when they're known to be civilians. All of this indicates very clearly that Israel's targeting in Gaza has been very indiscriminate, and even indiscriminate is being generous, since numbers like these can really only be achieved by intentionally targeting non-combatants. To kill such a huge proportion of people from demographics that are so unlikely to be combatants, such as women, children, and the elderly, really requires an intention to do so. And with that in mind, the pro-Israeli talking point that all or most of the male civilians who have been killed were actually combatants falls over. Because if they are killing so many clear civilians from groups like children and women, then it makes no sense to assume that they aren't also killing equally large amounts of male civilians. This can be further confirmed with an analysis of another significant modern conflict, the Bosnian War, which took place between 1991 and 1995. This is a conflict which is widely considered to have involved particular brutality towards civilians, and especially for its particular brutality towards Bosnian women. Estimates of civilian deaths during that war indicate that 22% of the civilian adult victims, children excluded, were women, and 78% were men. 35% of the overall deaths were of civilians, and 65% were of combatants. When combatants and non-combatants are counted together, 92% of the adult dead were men, and 8% were women. So imagine just how much Israel has to be intentionally targeting civilians in Gaza for there to be such a lopsided ratio of women and children among the dead there. In both Syria and Bosnia, the trend is very similar. Around one civilian woman killed for every 4 to 5 civilian men killed. If we were to apply this wider trend to Gaza, then that would indicate that the vast majority of these so-called military-aged men who have been killed there were civilians. It is incredibly notable that even compared to these two other cases, where a disregard for civilian life has been noted, the civilian death rate in Gaza is so high. Even if, for the sake of argument, we assume that every single so-called military-aged male who has been killed in Gaza were their combatants, which to make clear, they very obviously were not, and that only the dead women, children, and elderly were civilians, then the percentage of civilian dead would still be 56%. Compared to 35% in Bosnia and 26% in Syria. And obviously the actual ratio is far worse because every man in Gaza is obviously not a combatant. Given the patterns from Syria, Bosnia, and other modern conflicts, it would be fair to assume that, if anything, the vast majority of the men killed in Gaza were non-combatants. By the way, Israel and its propagandists have been running a PR campaign claiming that they are actually the most moral army of the world who take every precaution to avoid civilian deaths because, according to them, the normal civilian death rate in war is actually 90%, something that is very obviously just a lie, which can be easily refuted by just looking at a couple of modern conflicts and looking at what the ratio to civilian and military dead actually is. As I just did here, this claim that it is some sort of average that 90% of war dead are civilians is often repeated as if it is some sort of conventional wisdom. However, there has never been any evidence for it. Back in 2010, the academic Adam Roberts traced the origins of this claim and found that it originates from sources which, based on flimsy evidence, estimated that 90% of the victims of warfare were civilians. Victims in this case not actually meaning dead people, but rather victims of any sort, including people who have been injured, or people who had to flee their homes, or people who suffered some sort of economic loss or damage to their property or something like that as a result of the war. Roberts comes to the same conclusion that I did, that this claim simply has no basis in reality, and that the trend shown in most modern warfare is that significantly more combatants die violent deaths than civilians. And very relevant to this case here, Roberts ends his article noting that people who cite this supposed 9-to-1 civilian to combatant death rate use it not out of concern for civilians, but rather to spread indifference and to cynically justify civilian deaths. Precisely what's being done by those who cite this made-up, bogus 9-to-1 ratio to attempt to justify the horrific rate of civilian death in Gaza. The situation in Gaza renders it impossible to fully account for the dead at this time, but the evidence that is available is nonetheless of a far higher quality than what is usually accepted in the mainstream in circumstances like these. And this evidence paints a horrifying picture of indiscriminate attacks in which an absolute minimum flaw of 41,000 people have thus far been killed, the vast majority of whom were clearly civilians. And the abnormally high rate of clear civilian casualties makes it quite unlikely that this is anything but intentional targeting of civilians. Once the dust settles, once a full account is taken of Israel's crimes, only then will the true extent of the horror that they and their accomplices have inflicted upon Gaza be truly quantifiable. It is something that will take years, possibly even decades, to fully get a grasp of. The actual number of dead is certain to be significantly higher than what the Gaza Ministry of Health has been able to report, and more are still being killed every day. They're being killed while I record this video, they were being killed while I wrote it, they were being killed while I edited it, and if you're watching this while the attack is still ongoing, they're being killed while you watch it. And as always happens in cases like these, some of the victims will remain unidentified, unaccounted for forever, as their bodies will never be found, and none of their family members or friends are left to report them missing. Only estimates will be able to capture the true gravity of what Israel has done. And estimates that go into the hundreds of thousands would not at all be out of line at this point. Given the already high official death toll, the extent of the destruction of civilian infrastructure and dwellings, and the way that similar death counts have evolved in other events of mass killings in the past, including the Holocaust. Now, I want to end this video with one more example, one that I consider to be very important, to provide some insight into how denialism of these events and their death tolls tends to evolve as time passes and things become more clear. A glimpse into the future of what is likely to happen with Gaza death toll denialism as the full picture becomes clearer and the strategies of the denialists evolve. The Srebrenica massacre was perpetrated during the aforementioned war in Bosnia in 1995. Bosnian Serb separatists, supported by the Serbian state, rounded up everyone who they considered to be a man of military age in the vicinity of Srebrenica, then killed them all on the basis that their sex and age made them all combatants. Sounds familiar, right? Initially, the denialists said this massacre never happened. In 1996, though, after the war was over, international investigators were finally able to access the town and begin investigating the crime. After 6 years of investigation, they managed to find the remains of a total of 2,028 people who had been murdered, and they made it clear when they released that information that it was not at all the final toll, just the number of bodies that they had found. Overall estimates of the total number of dead remained far higher, with the most authoritative one at the time being 7,455. The denialists thereafter changed their strategy. They began dishonestly claiming that this report was a confirmation that only 2,000 had been killed, and the Bosnians were lying about the extent of the massacre. They treated this number, which was obviously never meant to be a final toll, as if it was, and they acted as if there were not many more victims still to be uncovered, as if estimates of the total number of dead did not go far higher. Given the fact that the dust had settled, the site had been investigated, and the corpses were piling up, it was no longer tenable for them to keep claiming the massacre had just never happened, so they instead moved on to downplaying the scale of it. With such total denial no longer possible, they also started claiming that even those 2,000 who they were accepting had been killed were actually combatants. They were battle casualties, according to them, a lie which was enabled by the fact that most of the victims were men and teenage boys. An argument that might sound very familiar because it is precisely what Israel and its supporters argue. Finally, after decades of effort, more and more bodies kept being found. More and more witnesses or family or friends of the victims were coming forward or being tracked down by investigators to determine who on the list of missing would have been in Srebrenica at the time of the massacre. The list of actually named and identified dead kept growing and growing, from initially being just a few thousand to fulfilling the 7,455 estimate which had been made many years earlier. And then the number kept growing. That estimate turned out to have been quite conservative. Up until today, the bodies of 7,000 victims have been found in and around Srebrenica, and the Srebrenica Genocide Memorial has a stone wall with the names of 8,372 victims inscribed on it. So even in this situation, where a massacre was committed in a relatively small, concentrated area, which makes investigation afterwards a whole lot easier, and which has been significantly investigated for almost 3 decades afterwards, there still remains at least 1,400 victims for which no body has ever been found. The memorial wall ends not with a period, but with an ellipsis, because the list is incomplete. In events of this scale, there are always more victims to be found,
We've taken the
and
lead.
some who
Stay
never
on
will
task.
be. Just this year, 30 years later, 14 more victims of the massacre were finally identified, demonstrating that fact quite well. We're only just scratching the surface of the true toll of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Attempts to quantify the massacre are still in the very, very early days. Just like in Srebrenica, the full extent of it can only be approximated long after it's over, and the list of the dead will continue to be added to for many years after that. 41,000 is only the beginning. Though what is less certain is whether the repulsive denialists of this toll will occupy the same place of deserved widespread derision as their cousins who deny and downplay Srebrenica do today. As the full picture becomes clearer, some of them will attempt to backtrack. They'll try to act like they never denied it. Others will move on to other forms of denial, just like the Srebrenica denialists did. I guarantee you that some of the people who are today saying that you can't trust the Gaza Ministry of Health's death figures will start actually saying that their figures are correct, and that you shouldn't believe the higher estimates that go beyond them, which are undoubtedly going to become more widely accepted as time passes. Just like the denialists did with the initial 2,000 figure in Srebrenica. It goes from, those numbers are a lie, to actually, these new higher numbers are a lie. I prefer those lower numbers now that I've previously denied denied, all combined with a nice dash of, well, they deserved it anyway. It's the same pattern every time. It'll happen here too. Watch out for it. At the end of the day, it is important to understand that these denialists are not, as they like to pretend, concerned with the truth or whatever. They are looking to enable and justify what Israel is doing in Gaza. Try any means necessary. They know what is really occurring and they want it to continue. And denying the death toll is a part of that. The idea is that if they can convince more people, more governments, and more organizations that fewer Palestinians have actually been killed and that a higher proportion of them deserved it, then it is more likely that Israel's crimes will be accepted as legitimate, making it easier for them to carry them out and avoid any potential consequences. They are engaging in textbook incitement, and while they may never be held accountable in a court, we can try our best to hold them accountable for it nonetheless. Submit deniers of the death toll in Gaza and supporters and deniers of the genocide in general to the Genocide Accountability Archive, which is linked in the description and the comment section of this video. This is a means through which we can make sure that they can't just go back and face the evidence of what they said and did while it was happening. Once it's over and the full extent of just how disgustingly wrong they are becomes even clearer than it already is. It's crazy, by the way, that many of these people who are doing so much now to try and sow doubt in the death toll in Gaza and to deny the genocide there have for many, many years weaponized this genocide denial label as a thought-terminating cliche against anyone who doesn't just uncritically believe that Western geopolitical enemies are committing genocide-level atrocities when the evidence for that is little to none compared to what there is for Gaza. In those cases, they are very happy to just call something a genocide and to vastly exaggerate the extent of it, despite having seen little to no evidence to back that up. And they act like anyone who does not immediately accept that has committed some sort of unforgivable slight. Yet in the case of Gaza, where the evidence is actually overwhelming, everything suddenly changes. The second that push comes to shove, they become actual genocide deniers themselves. Never let them forget it. That is the end of the video, but don't leave yet because I have another video for you that I think if you like this, you will also like. It is a video from December of 2023 in which I made the legal case with the evidence available up until that point that Israel had already committed genocide. And given everything that has happened since, let's just say the case is now even stronger.
CeeLo Green is an artist who is widely known for his singles Forget You and Crazy, both of which were certified platinum, topped the Billboard charts, and both won him Grammys. After nearly 20 years of varying success in the music industry, CeeLo Green had reached crazy heights, doing performances with the Navy, getting his own TV show, and becoming a judge on The Voice. But just a couple of years after all of these tracks, he was involved in a controversy coupled with a few pretty disturbing now deleted tweets that for the most part ended his professional music career. And this is how he got here. Now, I do want to clarify CeeLo Green is still very respected by many because he did have a very impressive career over the past couple of decades, but his actual music career as a solo artist really suffered greatly from the controversies and tweets that I'm going to be talking about. So you guys will see what I mean when we continue. Also, super quick, I did want to say that by the time this video is live, I will have launched my second channel, Maddie Squared. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free. I'll be doing more random, opinionated videos and just more fun video essays maybe I wouldn't think were fit for the main channel. There's a bunch of stuff I plan on doing over there, really anything I feel like, and then I also want to do some live streaming, but it's all going to be music related still. I'm not going to stray away from that. So I think it'll be fun if you guys are music enjoyers, if you're a fan of the channel. Feel free to support by checking that out as well, and I promise the videos will only get better going forward. I think you guys will like it, but that's enough yapping, so just check that channel out, link in the description. But let's continue with the video. If you don't know much about CeeLo Green, you might not know how legendary and well-respected he actually is. So much so that even after his major controversies, it's hard for me to say he fully ruined his career because he still is able to lock in with big artists to this day. And all of this is thanks to his work with a local Atlanta artist in the early 90s. CeeLo got connected with a collective called the Dungeon Family, a legendary group that if you have not heard of, you need to. Over the years, they worked with artists like Outkast, TLC, Killer Mike, CeeLo's group Goody Mob, and many more. I mean, because of these connections, CeeLo was even hanging around Pac and Big back in the day. Fun fact, the late and great producer Rico Wade was the guy who owned the house they recorded in, or I think technically it was his mom's house, but same difference. More specifically, they recorded in the basement though, and that's why it was called The Dungeon. And an even funner fact is that Rico Wade is Future's older cousin.